All right, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you joining us for SonNet and the Sonification World Chat. And we have it's a pretty full agenda this morning. So we're going to be abbreviating our usual introductions this morning. I would love to hear from folks that are brand new to the chat, or at least I don't recognize your names, but I am going to have Lev. I know Lev well, but I'm going to have you start and introduce yourself and what brought you here this morning, and then we'll go on to Carrie from there.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lev Hordisky. I work with Science Voices. Right now, it's a small nonprofit that works on equity and science education. We work on a number of projects in building adaptive, intelligent tutoring systems to use off the grid, as well as cross-cultural science exchanges. I'm currently located in Campinas, Brazil.
Okay, thanks, Lev. Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Computational Astrophysics in New York. I've actually been on one of these or two of these calls before, but not super regular about it, which I apologize. So I am working on my own sonification projects, and I'm working on putting together a workshop in the fall for sonification for quantitative research practices. So if people are interested in that, I would love to hear from you.
Okay, you can be sure that I'll be following up with you in the next couple of weeks, Carrie, because that sounds really interesting and definitely relevant. I've recently been talking to Duncan, and he is all booked up for a world chat that I'm getting scheduled for April. Duncan, introduce yourself.
Hi, folks. My name is Duncan. I am one half of Loud Numbers, which is a data sonification studio that I run with Miriam Quick. We've done a ton of kind of more like science communication and arts related sonifications over the last few years. We also have a podcast, which I think some of you may have listened to. Yeah, I'm located in Malmö in Sweden. This is my first Sonification World Chat. I'm very, very excited.
Thanks. Matthew.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matthew, and I'm an engineering student. I will finish my master's degree in September. And so for the next few months, I will work with Sarah about data sonification in the virtual reality world. So I'm working on it for projects we will during 5 months. And so I'm like a beginner in data sonification, but it looks nice.
Well, thank you. And that's what we're all about here, is trying to provide some foundational background and help people find more resources. And I've had a very exciting couple of months, other than whatever is happening federally. I've had some really great meetings with people like Duncan and Aura and Mark with the library folks, getting more networking and lots of different ideas going on. And I am really excited about the variety of things that we are going to be able to do. So abbreviating the introductions this morning, if the rest of you just want to put in, because most of the other people on here are either our speakers or part of the project. So if you just want to say hi in the chat, that would be just fine. And while we queue up, we are going to, Anita is going to be our first speaker this morning, and get her started. I do want to let you know that we did do an accessibility check on the Zoom recordings, and there are some screen reader challenges in there, but does work pretty well with all the features. So I'm happy to report that we'll keep using Zoom cloud recordings for our meetings. And if you have any suggestions for outreach and recruiting, I am all ears and all at your typing assistance here to get the word out. And we are looking forward to the 2025 AGU meeting. So in the next month or so, we will be starting to talk about what do we want our workshop to look like. So with that, Anita Zanella has been with the Sonification World Chat for ages and has been a real leader in getting one of the leaders on the data sonifications in astronomy. And we are very happy to have her presenting, giving us a background on the work that she was part of, looking at the overall scope and reach of data sonifications in astronomy. And that work was published in 2023. And what we are hoping to do with this project, part of GeoSonNet with the help of Matt and Steve with the Everett Group, is to look at how can we possibly piggyback on that work and start gathering that same type of information as the data sonifications in the geosciences. It starts to emerge. Hopefully, with the help of this project, we will be able to accelerate that, but that's what we want to know, what's working and how are we reaching people. So with that, Anita, go take it away.
Thank you, Kate, for the very nice introduction. Great to see you all again. I was missing the Sonification World Chat for a while, so it's very nice to be back. So I would like to share a presentation, just mainly tells me to drive my, wait, I also want to share the audio. Okay, share sound. Okay, and now it should be full screen now. Okay, I will try to be clear, describe what's on the slides whenever it's needed, but please feel free to interrupt me at any time if anything is unclear or you just want to add something to what I'm saying. So as Kate asked me to talk about the efforts that we have been doing about sonification in astronomy, I decided to start from this 2022 review that we put together. And then I will just conclude mentioning some of the most recent efforts that we have been carrying out to evaluate the effectiveness of sonification in different directions, let's say, for research purposes, educational purposes, and public engagement and outreach purposes. So I would say that astronomy is the stereotypical visual science. We are all used to think of astronomers. I am an astronomer, but I would say we are all as a community used to think that astronomy, we do it with the eyes. Not only now the astronomers look into the telescope. This is something we don't do anymore, but still remains in the general culture as an image and the imagination of the astronomer work. But more modernly and more in general, I would say telescopes collect light, researchers do research using visual tools, and astronomy is presented to the public and in the schools by using beautiful images and visualizations and videos. However, this has mainly two big limitations. The first one is that we limit the study of astronomy and science in general to a monosensory exploration, whereas we are used to explore reality with all our senses. So it's a multisensory exploration, actually. But also we lack tools that allow blind and visually impaired people to access astronomy research, outreach, and education. And I would say that there's really no reason for that, because I would say we are all blind to the universe. By eye, we can see about 1,000 stars, the brightest and the closest, but then we need telescopes, so instruments to see beyond that. And also the light that we can see with our eyes is just a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. All the rest of the radiation is not perceivable with our eyes. And again, we need instrumentation. And what the instrumentation does is to provide us with numbers that we translate into images to make sense of them. So recently, we have been taking up the challenge of translating these numbers into sound. And I would say that there is a huge potential for these multisensory approaches to astronomy education, research, and that this really benefits everyone, sighted people and visually impaired people at the same time and in the same way. So I'm not saying that we need to replace all the visual information in astronomy with sound, but we should enhance visuals with sound, and this also will make astronomy accessible. So starting this, the starting point, let's say, of this effort was to try and gather what has been done so far in astronomy about sonification. So a great starting point, and I would say great help in that research was the Data Sonification Archive. Here there is a typo in the title, but okay, the Data Sonification Archive, Sara Lenzi is one of the responsible for it, and she's on this call. So I'm sure if you have questions, she will be not only able, but probably happy to answer them. The Data Sonification Archive is a great repository where sonification in different fields are gathered, and among them, astronomy is one of the fields, and maybe one of the most populated fields. So we use this instrument to gather the astronomy sonification projects that were available until 2022, the year of the study. So we discovered in this way that the first sonification study in astronomy dated back in 1960. And at that time, this project was meant to reveal some signatures, some features in data. So the purpose was research. Since then, many new projects started to grow and to appear. And since 2016, between 8 and 19 new projects started to appear every year. So we gathered them with the idea to consolidate what had been done, to share knowledge, and to start working towards some shared standards to evaluate the effectiveness of sonification. So what we did was to try and understand what was the main goal of those 98 projects. And most of them, so 35% of them, had public engagement as the first goal. A good number of them, so 25%, were created for research purposes. 17% had art in mind, so they started from an artistic, let's say, need, and they were mainly created by artists. Only 13% of them had accessibility in mind. So this is less than we expected. However, many of these projects had accessibility as a secondary goal. So accessibility was not the first goal in the first place, but anyway, including sonification, we are making astronomy accessible, irrespective of the goal that we have. And most of the users that are intended of these sonifications are the general public. So this is almost 80%. And researchers are the remaining 20%. We also did a bit of study of what were the multimedia. So very often sonification was made through a GUI or interfaces. In many cases, it was accompanying visual elements. In some cases, only sonification was created. So yeah, we gathered all these projects. We also tried to divide them into their main purpose, so research, education, and public engagement, and to give some examples in this review that we put together and find some patterns. However, at that time, we also tried to identify what were the main challenges and the main open points. What we understood was that standards were lacking and proper evaluations were lacking. So many astronomers that were enthusiastic about sonification were creating these projects, but they were not really evaluating them. So we started to do so. We started to pair up with sound designers to have better sounds and with psychologists to do proper evaluations. And so in the following, I'm showing you some projects that we have been pushing in recent years to evaluate sonifications in these different branches, let's say. So the first case is an evaluation of sonification for research purposes. I would say the astronomical content is not really important, but the idea is that we were trying to sonify light curves. So we have a star and the planet that passes in front of the star. As in the case of an eclipse, when a planet is in front of the star, there is a dip in the luminosity of the star. So usually astronomers recognize this dip as a decrease in luminosity in a graphic form. So we tried to map the brightness of the star with pitch and with the duration of the sound, and to evaluate what was the success rate of the users in the two cases. So I will let you listen to one example. So the first one is a mapping of brightness to pitch. The dip in the star brightness is perceivable as an increase in pitch. Okay, I hope the sound came through. Yeah, okay. Now the second example, with the duration of the sound. Longer sounds indicate the transit, so the passage of the planet in front of the star is happening. Okay, we also had a combined stimulus of pitch plus duration, which is a combination of these two. So this one that I let you listen to was let's say, an easy example, but we had cases where the noise was much more important, and therefore it was more difficult to find the signal. We repeated the experiment with astronomers and non-astronomers. We asked them to find the transit, so this signal, in visual data and in sonification using the different mappings. What we concluded is that the performance is much better in general with visualizations rather than with sonification, but the results with sonification are above chance level, so they're good. What I found interesting is that astronomers were performing much better than non-astronomers with visualizations. And the reason for that is that we, as astronomers, are used to look at noisy data and at graphs. We are trained to look at graphs. We do that every day. So what we start to think is that if we have training since the youngest stages to listen attentively to data, probably the performances with sonification will also improve. And so I would say this is opening now the way and the path to do some more experiments that, based on the training, what kind of training we need, how long does it have to be, and so on and so forth. The other point that I found interesting in that experiment was the calculation of the response bias. So how much the astronomers or non-astronomers were prone to say, yes, there is signal, or no, there is no signal. What we found is that especially in the low signal to noise case, so when it's difficult to find the signal, with graphs, usually people would say, no, there is no signal, even if the signal is there. Whereas with sonification, there is less bias. So the conclusion here is that with graphs, we might be missing some detections just because we are very conservative. And of course, for scientists, this is a problem. So I would prefer to have more false positives than missing detections or missing events. So in this case, sonifications might be useful to avoid missing detections. So this is just an example about the use of sonification for research purposes. Another experiment we have been carrying out is the use of sonification for education. So in this case, we did an experiment with the middle school kids. There are 150 kids. They're mixed classes in Italy with sighted and blind kids. We were using Educoi, which is a tool. So you have to move the hand in front of the computer, and a camera recognizes the position of your finger and lets you listen to the sound of the color of each pixel, depending on where your finger is touching. We used in this case a mapping that is, let's say, natural mapping. So we associated the blue color with bubbles, so water bubbles, the red color with the sound of fire in a fireplace, and the green color with the chirping of the birds and the sound of leaves reminding of a forest. The study was trying to evaluate how effective this sonification was in color recognition and shape recognition. We first used some some sketches and some geometric shapes, and then the shapes of galaxies. So I will first let you listen to some of these sounds so you can maybe better imagine the experiment. In this case, there is a hand that is going on top of the image of a galaxy that has different colors, red, blue, and I will let you listen to some sounds. Okay, this was with musical instruments. You can also change the mapping and use the natural one that I described. The two different sounds that you could hear were blue regions or red regions in the same galaxy. So what we concluded from this study is that color recognition was extremely easy for the kids. We explained it once and they were able to have, let's say, success rates that were about 100% immediately. And also the students remembered the colors after, we repeated the experiment after a few months, and they could remember the association between sound and colors after a few months without using the tool. So color recognition was easy for them, especially for the sketches where only one color at the time was presented. When we presented them with real images of galaxies where different colors were overlapped, they could still recognize multiple colors happening at the same time. So they could listen in this case to the blue and red color, bubbles and fire at the same time. Success rate in color recognition was about 80%, so still very good. Recognizing shapes was more difficult. Again, it was above chance level, but it was about 60%. So there is more work that needs to be done on this. Finally, one last example about public engagement. Together with Chris Harrison, we took up the challenge of designing and creating a planetarium show starting from sonification instead of visuals. So planetarium shows are usually made of amazing videos. We took up the challenge of reverting, let's say, the order and start from sounds. So in this case, the planetarium show is a journey through the solar system. And there is a spacecraft that goes around, but it starts from Chile, where one of the main observatories on Earth is located. And one of the first scenes is the appearance of stars in the dark sky in the desert. So now I will let you listen to the clip. Stars of different colors have different sounds, and the spatial direction of the sound represents the location of where the star appears in the night sky. So really, we're translating data into sound in an accurate way. Okay, also in this case, we used the questionnaire to gather the experience of the participants. We had adults, children, visually impaired and sighted participants. In this case, we were asking mainly two questions. The first one was, after the show, how much do you think that studying or working in astronomy is accessible for blind or visually impaired people? And most of the people, both adults, children, they said more. I believe now that astronomy is accessible. The other question was, after the show, how much do you think that studying or working in astronomy is accessible for blind and visually impaired people? And also in this case, for sighted and non-sighted audiences, the answer was more. I'm now more sure. So I would say that using sonification for public engagement enhances the perception of astronomy as an accessible science for everyone. And so this is, it allows us to change the perspective of the public at least a bit. So I think I would now stop. And if anything was unclear or if you have questions, I would be happy to answer.
Well, thank you, Anita. One of the questions I was thinking about right away was just your summary slide. If you could do us the favor of explaining this graph and how to interpret it, because I know that was a challenge. But I really enjoyed all the new information that you had up and the new studies that you guys have done. That's some really great work in the last couple of years. Appreciated hearing about that.
Yes, what I'm showing in this slide is a very complex graph with lots of, let's say, visual information. So there is a bar on the left-hand side. There are some words written: public engagement, research, art, accessibility, and education, and the percentage next to each one. This indicates how many projects have, for example, public engagement as the main goal. Each of these categories have different color. And there are curves that connect these categories to a second bar that is called user. This is general public or researchers. So what this first part of the graph is telling us is what are the users of the projects that have public engagement as main goal or that have research as main goal. So for example, all the public engagement works have the general public as a user. The research works instead have, in a minority of cases, the general public as the main user, and in the majority of cases, the researchers as the users, and so on and so forth. And the second part of the graph connects the users with the, let's say, multimedia. And the idea is the same, to try and understand how the different sonifications are, let's say, rendered in the multimedia way. Was it clear enough, Kate?
Yes, I appreciate that. And I'm going to take on a challenge of seeing if I can create a tactile version of that, because I don't think a sonification of that will work well. So I think that information that's there is of high interest in understanding that when you're starting on the far left, that there can be a split in your actual user audience and what it's going to be used for. So to follow those is your challenge here. So thank you. Other questions, just go ahead and unmute and ask, because we don't have a very large group here. So if you'd like to have Anita go back and answer any questions about any part of the presentation, please do.
This is Amy Bauer. I have a question. Well, comment first. That was very interesting. It's really cool stuff that you've been working on. My question goes back to the planet transit example, and you tested it with scientists and or astronomers and non-astronomers. Were any of those subjects blind or low vision?
No, we had a few, but not enough to really draw conclusions. So we mainly focused on astronomers and non-astronomers because we had a good statistics of both groups. But no, the other reason is that we also compared to visuals. So clearly it didn't really make sense for the big pool of visually impaired people.
Right. But and I agree with your conclusion that scientists have more experience and are trained in the interpretation of visualizations. But similarly, blind and low vision people, although I don't think many receive training in interpreting data sonifications, they may be nonetheless more in tune or more sensitive, more aware, more cognitively engaged with audio. And so, you know, they may be able to interpret. I just think it would be interesting using the audio only to compare blind and low vision population with the sighted population.
Yes, thanks. I agree. What we are doing right now, sorry, first a comment. Yes, for training, I also mean not only the training we get, let's say in schools, but also the daily training of just repeating the same action over and over. That is what researchers do. We keep staring at grass and we get used to it. So trying to understand if that's really the difference between experts and non-experts, we are now repeating a similar experiment with musicians and non-musicians. To try and understand if training in listening makes a difference. Yes, the next option is also to try blind and non-blind people. That's also possible.
With audio only, yeah.
With audio only, of course.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I have to chime in here and point out that my friend and colleague, Matt Henry, before he came to work with the Everett Group, worked at the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force, which is where I first met him. He was the conductor and commander of the U.S. Air Force Europe Band. And he is a top-notch musician. So if he was getting fidgety when you were showing, Anita, showing the sonifications of the galaxy, he texted me directly and said, oh, that should be a trumpet, which is what Matt plays at the center of the galaxy. I told him no, it needed to be some very low instrument like a bassoon, because there's a big black hole in the middle there. So just be aware there's going to be complications when musicians get involved, okay? Sorry.
Yes.
That's very good. Other questions? Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah. Hi, Anita. I had a quick question. I was curious about the experiment you were doing with the middle school students, and were you tying that into any particular scientific curriculum? Was it about why stars would have different luminosities, or were you connecting it with the electromagnetic spectrum, or how do you think that could be tied into the science curriculum?
We were linking it with the science curriculum, and then interestingly, the art teacher got very, very interested. So I think they then started to use the tool within art classes, but that was not our main goal. So we didn't really follow up with that. As part of the science curriculum, I mean, the first part was all about geometric shapes. So geometry is an easy link. And then in science, students in Italy start to learn also something about space, planets mainly. But the teacher allowed us to talk about galaxies. It didn't really, it was not really a problem for them. So the connection was geometry for the first part, and then science, a bit of astronomy for the second part.
And when you do a study like that, I'm imagining you're working with a very small sample. Do you at some point then want to scale that up and have, you know, hundreds or thousands of students be testing that sort of a technique with the hand and the colors and shapes?
It was not really a small sample. We had 150 students.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now classes in Italy have they call it a computer room, where there are about 20 computers. That means one per kid. So of course we were making the screens blind, so the students were moving their hands, but they couldn't see the images. They could just listen to them. At that point, sighted and non-sighted students had the same opportunities, let's say. But each student at that point had one computer, and they could run the experiment all simultaneously. So that was really a science class that lasted about 1 hour, and we were gathering and collecting data while, let's say, teaching. But yeah.
Okay, I guess I assumed it was just one class, so it sounds like there was a good sized sample and you can make some good inferences from that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Adrian, because I was wondering how you were doing that with that particular tool, and I didn't catch that you had blanked the screens for them. So that's that is very interesting.
This is Olivia. I have kind of a couple quick follow-up questions. So first of all, I really love that you, it was a great presentation, and I really love that you underscored the fact that, you know, it's actually monosensory exploration is very unnatural. That's not how we normally do things. My questions are, in answer to Amy's question, you mentioned a bit about some of the next steps that you intend to take. I wonder if you could expand on that anymore. And do you have any other projects or studies that you intend to do? And then second question is, what about the rest of us? What do you see others being able to do with the research that you've done, and what next steps and actions could we take with that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. I will start with the first one. If I got it right, you're asking what are the next experiments we are carrying out. So as I said, there are mainly two that I'm carrying on together with the psychologists. One is an evaluation of the performances of musicians with respect to non-musicians, to understand whether, let's say, training in listening really provides better performances in sonification. The second experiment that we are now running is about training. So we are assessing whether training people leads also to better performances. So we ask people to repeat the same sonification experiment during 5 days in a week. So the first time we explain the experiment, the next days they repeat it. And what we want to see is if with training the performances improve, and when. So how many days of training do we need? A couple is enough, or do they need to repeat 5 times, or does something change? So these are the two main studies we are carrying out. About what the rest of you can do. I mean, I was presenting the main works I'm involved with, but many of you and many people in the community are working on other experiments and similar ones. I know Adriana, Fia, and I mean, many people are really, really have interesting studies. So I don't know, maybe getting their perspectives also might be interesting and would open other ways. My main take-home point, I would say, from the experience I had is team up with people that have a different background from you. So I'm an astronomer, I'm teaming up with sound designers and with psychologists. And in this way, I'm really learning how to do things. And I would say that expertise is really fundamental. The other thing is, if you aim at working or doing experiments with blind or low vision people, then team up with them, at least to assess if the experiments are meaningful, are run in a proper way. So I would say team up with people that have the expertise you need. That would be the main suggestion. I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but.
Well, I appreciate, I think you did, and I appreciate Olivia asking that particular question, because we're looking at new projects here, and how to, as people have young projects, what are the main things, what are the recommendations of people who've been doing this for a while? And it has been our experience with Sonification World Chat, and you have mirrored that as well, that it's important to have a multidisciplinary team and to involve all the user groups that you are target audiences, blind, low vision, children, adults, scientists, get everybody involved in the testing, and the more diverse team you have, the stronger your project will be. And that is so.
And maybe one more thing, sorry, Kate, if I can add, is what I'm learning is keep your goal in mind very clearly. So if your goal is research, you need a certain type of sonification. If your goal is education or outreach, then maybe you need a different one. I mean, researchers can work with sounds that are a bit unpleasant. The public will not come to your show if the sound is highly unpleasant. For the kids, we decided to use natural mappings instead of the musical instruments that I let you listen to. So the musical instruments are more pleasant to listen to than the water bubbles for a while. but the water bubbles are a lot easier to remember. The association between natural sounds and colors might be easier to remember than the instruments. That's what we have been seeing with this experiment. So I would say keep in mind the goal.
Yeah, did you use any particular methods to figure out the natural sound mapping?
If we use, sorry?
Did you, how did you choose bubbles? And, you know, they all make sense, but I'm sure you had choices to make there. How did you go about making those choices?
So we were using literature from the psychoacoustics domain. That's something that people working in psychoacoustics have been exploring for a while. So we use associations like water and blue, fire and red that have been a part of experiments in that domain for a while.
Well, that's absolutely excellent. And with that, we are going to wrap up Anita's session. And if you'll stop sharing the screen. I was pleased to find out after we started Anita's presentation that yes, I need to make sure I have sufficient amounts of coffee before I get started on the morning, because Leaf is not presenting till the afternoon. So we have plenty of time to work with. And Leaf will be presenting his this afternoon. I will have a recording ready for his as soon as possible. After that, we may show his recording at the early session in April. So to be determined. I'm still figuring out how to juggle all these time zones. So with that, we're going to move to Sarah Lindsay, and she was really instrumental in the success of the Audible Universe conference, and that we met in person in 2022 at the University of at Leiden University, the Lorentz Institute, and getting the sound people and the astronomers and a significant number of people with visual impairments together in the same room and online to explore getting a design structure behind how we think about creating sonifications. So when I first started in the area of looking at sonifications, I found there's a lot of people really interested, but it's one data person working in their study with some Python code, and I'm not thinking about the design process, or as in Bruce's expertise area is getting to the evaluation piece. So Sarah's group really helped put some structure under that. And so I'm looking forward to having you all introduced to the design canvas. So Sarah, go ahead and take it over.
Thank you, Kate. I'm flattered. I'm not sure I was critical to the success of the Audible Universe, but thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. Thank you, Anita, for the first part. There's a lot of overlapping, I think, between our two presentations and the way it ended, particularly about how do we make choices when we start to a new sonification project. So what I will present is about that. And I'll share. Where is all good? Do you see the first slide that reads the data sonification canvas?
Yes, we see the slide and the slide only. And
okay, great. That's great. So the data sonification canvas is a tool for sonification design. I'll get to what a tool for designers is before you think that it's any fancy digital or interactive application. Is basically a piece of paper, either a literal piece of paper or a digital piece of paper. So the real critical part of being a tool is in what it says in the contents, but a very quick overview where does the canvas come from. Anita already, thank you for that, introduced the data sonification archive. So the canvas is part of a bigger project that dates back to my PhD research and the work we've been doing at the Density Design Lab in Politecnico di Milano, which is an information design lab, a data visualization lab, where I had the pleasure to introduce sound. So when I was there, we started this project of the data sonification archive that basically started with me collecting a few cases, a few sonification projects, and see how I could look into that to gather relevant information to inform my projects. So selfish endeavor. I start collecting disparate. The goal was to map the sonification world. Who is doing sonification? Why? Where? And then another one of these fancy diagrams, but basically what Anita showed earlier, where we used also in the review paper in the review study for sonification for astronomy, is the way that we at the Data Sonification Archive classify projects. This has been an iterative process, and at the moment we are using these categories, and now we just launched-ish. We are in the process of launching a new version of the archive where you will be able to search using this classification, which is the one we use when we curate new projects. So we analyze existing sonification projects by their intended goal. So why was this sonification done? Is it an artwork? Was it accessibility? I mean, Anita went through these categories, so I will skip, but we can go back. And of course, you will have this presentation later. Other questions we ask ourselves: who are the intended users? What sonification method was used? The community, the sonification community over the decades agreed on certain methods that are codified and are defined, like parameter mapping, audification. What is the media mix? Another thing that Anita already showed. And then, of course, we classify them by
Okay, am I the one that's frozen or are you?
You're not frozen, Kate.
No.
Okay, we'll wait on Sarah. Hopefully she will rejoin us in a second. Doesn't bode well for I'll do some editing when we get to the.
And it was getting really good too.
I know. So, I'll send her, let's see, what will I do here? I'll send her, nope, we completely dropped her. She will be back. I was going to explain that graphic a little more while we waited, but I assume that she will return to us. Yeah, those graphics are something. And what's surprising when I'm looking at that graphic is, as we've known for years, is a lot of the data sonifications are being done in astronomy, but to see them also in the earth sciences is
sorry, first time in my life the Zoom crashes.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. We were on the slide with the with all of the different projects and their goals. Slide 3.
Would it make sense to kind of rewind and start again a little bit?
We can I can edit. If you want to just start again at this slide, then I'll edit it out
Awesome.
this afternoon.
Thanks.
We're all good. So I think we're good to go.
Yeah, okay. This one, right? Where
Yeah.
I was showing the way. Okay, so this is the way we currently classify the new projects. We classified existing projects on the archive. So it's not a coincidence that this classification was also in Anita's diagram, but I will not go through it too much unless you can ask me any questions you have later. So we classify by their intended goal, as mentioned by Anita. Is it an artwork? Is it accessibility? Is it for real-time monitoring? By their intended users, domain expert, general public, by the method, the sonification method they used. The sonification community has defined several methods that are accepted and have their own definition and scientific literature, like audification, parameter mapping, and then, of course, media mix. We talked about it already, and the micro topic. So you heard me say intended goal, intended audience. So in the design world, be it, product design or experience design or service design, what designers say is that a prerequisite is the why we are doing that. and the impact you want to have on the real world. We define this as intentionality in design. It is basically all those decisions that we make when we design something, we create something, and we are asking ourselves, what do I want to communicate with this? What is the real world problem or phenomena in our case I want to represent, and for whom?
Oh no, another crash.
Since she kind of ended on a question, it's like a cliffhanger.
You're muted.
Kate, if you're trying to say something, you're muted.
Okay, so thank you. So distracted from this. Bruce, I'm wondering if you could interpret this slide for us, which is now gone. So I'm glad we have a little extra time this morning. Maybe editing will be a little interesting this afternoon. We'll hopefully have her back in a moment. And here we have Sarah back.
I'm really sorry, I have no idea. Actually, Mathieu is here with me, and I believe his computer, I mean, in the same building, his computer is working, his connection.
No, we haven't lost him at all. So, but go ahead and start with your intentionality slide, and yeah.
Again, okay. So you haven't heard.
I was just thinking if you start with interpreting that slide, then we can move from there.
Yeah, okay. That's really quick. The intention of this slide, the intentionality of this slide is really to show the other piece of information that we used to define the canvas. That was basically, why are people designing, doing sonification? And we created this, we defined a continuum where we analyzed existing cases, and we said some of these cases are better at communicating, are more successful in that sense, and some other of these successful meaning they use the right metaphors that we discussed with Anita, color blue water bubbles, or they use the right medium, or they use the right combination of sensory modalities, and some others perhaps they are not so successful, but not because they are badly designed, rather that because the authors perhaps didn't ask themselves these questions. Why and how am I doing that? The last piece of information was my work with authors of sonifications that I interviewed at length to come out really with what mattered to them. What were the critical decisional points they were using to create a new sonification. And from all that, we said, okay, we have now all this information. How do we put it together in a tool that can be useful, that can be replicable in other contexts and by other people? And we decided to instantiate this research in a design canvas. This is what a design canvas looks like. There are for many things, designing new businesses or products. It all goes back to what was successfully commercialized as the design thinking method, but it really comes from a design research and the reflection of what it means to be a designer, where versus being an engineer or being an artist. What makes design unique? In the lab where I was, we already used something called the visualization canvas. And then we mimic, in a way, we borrowed that format to come up with what is today the data sonification canvas, which is this rectangular piece of paper defined by 4 building blocks. So I will go into each of these building blocks, but the idea of the canvas was really to provide a self-reflection tool, something that anyone, regardless of their expertise in sound or expertise with data, if they wanted to integrate sound in any information representation project, specifically data sonification project in this case,
Okay, we have frozen again, and Matthew is not frozen. I am wondering if either we need to turn Matthew's camera off, or if there's anything else that we can do to assist this process. But we're getting to the really exciting part where we have what we were presented with at the Audible Universe in terms of the Canvas space itself and going through the thinking process on that. So we have dropped. And Matthew, do you have any information for us that would be helpful? Are we just...
About Sarah, she's coming to be back, but I think it's because of the internet connection.
Okay, we'll just try it again. But this is a really good, interesting part of what I found incredibly useful things to go through a sonification that I was familiar with, and to go through a design process where we were thinking about and just assessing how our sonifications did in terms of the design process, and then going back through and saying what new decisions could we make based upon this process. And unfortunately, Bruce had to go teach, so I can't ask him to fill in any spaces here. Anita, do you have, I could also, you know what I could do is I could bring up the, I do what I can do here.
Yeah, I'll also mention one of the things that was useful about the Canvas, because I was part of that online group at that symposia. What also helped, what Kate was saying, we had a chance to work with an existing sonification and study it using the Canvas, and then we got to work with the team. But again, it was that idea of a multidisciplinary team. So we were doing self-reflection, but we were also engaging in the communication and learning how our languages are very different as well, even using the same terminology. So I think they're back, but it's really a great tool.
Sarah, you know what I can do is I'm going to put up your slides on my end and see if you can just go ahead and
did you open the presentation? No.
Yes, I have the presentation open here, and if you want to do that, we can.
Because I sent it to Mathieu. I'm really sorry. It really never happened.
No, that's okay. If you would like to just start here, let's just try from here and just tell me when to go to the next slide.
Yeah, so I think we are ready for the next slide, because then we start getting a bit more into the content.
Okay.
As I said,
hold on, there we go.
Yeah. So the Canvas, the current version, because we have a new version in preparation, there are limits to this format that I will go through later, hopefully, unless it's the room. So the first block really asks you to define your use case. We found, talking to experts authors of sonification and through the work at the archive, that not everybody asked themselves really, who will be my listeners? What are the goals of what I'm doing, and what is the context of the sonification? Maybe we can already, Kate, go to the next one that is about the first block. Yep, and then next again. Yep, so the parts of the first use case block are visually split in users, goals, context. And what really we are trying to stimulate someone that is starting a sonification project is to ask herself or himself questions such as, who will at the end listen to this? So do they have any stake? Are they stakeholder in a specific process? So if we are doing sonification for astronomers, are our final listeners astronomers or non-astronomers? Or is it a political issue or a social issue that we are trying to represent? And then do these people that will listen to it have a specific opinion about it? Are we trying to convince them that they are wrong or reinforce that they are right? I mean, all really, even the ethical responsibility when we do something like that, because we are communicating something, whether we want it or not. In fact, the new version of the Canvas will have another block that is called consequences. So is what we are doing, these new sounds we are introducing, are they meaningful? Are they sustainable in the broader picture? You know, it really asks you to think about that and take your decisions accordingly. And it is meant to be an iterative process. So the whole idea of also having this piece of paper is to fill in one and then a second one and then a third one and then go back to the first one and see how the project has changed, is really also to help you document your reflection process. The goals, ideas of questions, we put in ideas, and then it really depends on the specificities of your project. But it's really your goal as an author, your goal as a sonifier. Are you addressing specific needs? And what are these specific needs? The idea is that you try to be as specific as you can here. And this will really greatly help you along the way. At least this is the hope. We can move, Kate. Sorry, I have to ask you that. And the context, those ideas of questions for the context. This is the context of experiencing the sonification when it will be released and published. Is it an online, is it an interactive web page, or is it a physical installation in a physical space? Are listeners using headphones, for instance? This greatly changes the decisions you will take along the way. Cultural connotations is also a perhaps underexplored area of reflection in sonification, but are the sounds I'm using like universally understandable? Or maybe they aren't, because this is not the goal of my project. And we can go to another block. This is a bit more technical, maybe considering that we are also late due to my issues. I will not go too deeply into that. We can
You're actually okay, because Leaf isn't here, and we're gonna go till after. We've got till 9:30 if we need it.
Okay, thank you. So this is really about the specificities of data sonification. So it really asks you to reflect on your raw material, your tools, your rules that you will apply to the project. So what are the sounds you are going to use? Behavior stands for how does sound change over time depending on changes in the data set? What is its semantic function? This we are starting getting a bit into technicalities. And then is it combined with other modalities, as Anita discussed earlier? So next slide, please, Kate. Types of sounds. Here, really, the idea was to, again, stimulate a reflection on choosing your sounds. Many times, the choices of what types of sound we use in a sonification might be dictated by the tools we have and how skilled we are in sound design. If we aren't, and we use a program that gives us MIDI piano sounds, then we most likely will go for MIDI piano sounds, regardless of whether they are the most appropriate. So there might be contingent decisions. Even so, it's good that we are aware of that. And perhaps we think of reaching out to a friend that is a sound designer and expanding the team, as Anita was saying, because of course we are not expected to be experts in everything. So are the choices of sounds we are making limited by our skills or our technologies? And if we could instead have whatever we want, then what will these sounds sound like? A behavior is about the rules that link changes in the data sets to changes in the sounds, the so-called mapping rules. Are we leveraging psychoacoustics, for instance, as in Anita's research? Or are we using instead embodied metaphors? It's another framework. So this refers to what really controls how sound changes. Bruce could talk about one of his most famous, perhaps, experiments with visually impaired users, listeners, sighted and blind listeners who interpreted the mapping metaphors completely opposite ways. So again, what is the criteria that we use when we establish these rules? And next slide. Functions is there is another one before. Kate, I think, yeah. Functions comes from the world of semiotics. So back when we worked on the canvas, we also had several workshops with information designers who came from the design field, strictly speaking. So they also had a training in semiotics. And at that time, it seemed like a good idea to reflect on this. It turns out to be a bit, technical, complex to gauge by people that are not trained either in philosophy or communication sciences. So we might remove it. But anyway, is the idea to reflect on how connected is this sound that we are using with the real world phenomenon that it stands for. With the idea that this would guide or give you ideas again on choices that you may want to make. So are you opting for straight for a causal connection, like we represent rainfalls and we use the sound of rain? Do we want to do that? So literal, it might be appropriate for a specific context or for a specific audience. Or instead, do we want to use sounds as auditory icons? Is it an icon of something that is real? Like we use a sound of throwing paper, the famous Apple sound that has been discontinued, right? We are crushing a piece of paper to represent the bin. Or is it really arbitrary, as it might happen with musical sounds, with the trumpet? I decide I go for the trumpet because it's an homage to my past. That's perfectly legit. Just the more you are aware, the more your audience will be, most likely. And then what are the other modalities you combine sonification with, if any? And we can go to the next. Okay, thank you. Yep. And then so what we called back then sonification approach. This is really about overarching intentions. And this is borrowed from visualization, where some authors proposed a framework where there's a big overarching polarity in data visualization from a design perspective, where you are asked to decide to position your work in this continuum between an analytical intention, where you really need your audience to understand hard values in a data set, maybe because they have to take decisions based on that, maybe because they are operators in a control room, so they have tasks associated with understanding specific data values. Or is your intention narrative? Are you telling a story to engage the general public? Another thing that Anita was saying earlier, right? These are very broad, generic distinctions, but they bring about a lot of other secondary decisions. So they are critical. And we can go to and of course, this, this could change. Yeah, this was an example. It could change even over the course of the project. So it's something that we say, ask yourself when you start, and then you might change your idea as you go. And it's also good to go back and see how the perspective has changed and what is the relative weight of an analytical versus a narrative approach. And the last block, thank you, Kate. It's about, this is borrowed from sound design for films theory, that actually from Michel Chion's work, that also borrows from Pierre Schaeffer, perhaps the father of electroacoustic music, and his definition of the audience listening experience. when we hear electronic sounds that are somehow disconnected from the real world. We don't see a musician making a gesture that results in a sound. This disconnection requires an additional attentive listening, as Anita was saying again. Thank you, Anita, for all these inputs. And Michel Chion defines 3 different listening attitudes that we as designers, as composers, need to imagine, because then the sound we make, the sonification we make, should have this expectation embedded already. Causal is like listening attitude, the listening experience that we have in everyday life. We tend to have, when we hear a sound, we tend to connect the sound with the source that produced it. Again, rain, oh, it's raining. Dogs bark, there is a dog. This is the causal connection. So if we use in a sonification barking sounds, most likely people will think of dogs. If we don't want them to think of dogs, maybe we should opt for a different sound or provide more context or make other decisions. The semantic listening attitude is where we need a code to understand the sound. Music, Western classical music, sonata form, it has a specific code, it has a specific grammar. If understanding this grammar is part of what we expect our listeners to do, then we need to be ready to provide enough information. And reduced, finally, is something that typically sound designers or sound artists would do, which is listen to the sound, to the pure sound, to its acoustic components, the change in pitch, the timbre of the sound. So really we focus on the sound abstracted from external meanings. This is quite typical, I would say, in digital sound. So we are listening to understand, for instance, is it this sound clean enough? Is it clear that the pitch shifts, and etc. So this is very specific from electroacoustic music. And again, we put it there at the beginning thinking that it was an interesting input. It might be a bit difficult to understand. Even so, it is something that we do in sonification, like in the examples of Anita, when we ask our listeners to focus on the change of pitch, regardless of whether this is a piano sound or it's a human voice. Just focus on how the frequency changes. This is reduced listening. If we don't want our listeners to do that, then we need to change the type of sound or change the way we describe our work. We can move, Kate, because this is what I just said. This is just quickly, if you are more interested more than what I can say today, there is a paper where we described a first mini evaluation study that we conducted. We asked 50 participants and about half came back. We used an existing format for evaluating digital experiences, digital products. It's called attractive. It measures the pragmatic quality, which is this product doing what you intended to do? And then the hedonic qualities, which is, does it also appeals to its users? HQ is hedonic quality I in the graph diagram at the right, which stands for identification. So do I really feel that this tool is something I want to use? Does it fit with my life and my values? And the other is S stands for motivation, which doesn't start with S. There's another word that I don't remember now, how is it defined? Stimulation, I think. But anyway, it's defined as, how motivated you are in using this tool for your work. And we performed quite well. Interestingly, the summary of all the variables that are used in attractive, which is at the left side, said that is a self-oriented tool, which we were quite pleased about because this is really how we designed, how we imagined the canvas. And there are other data, but I don't think is relevant. I mean, I didn't put them in the presentation. So, Kate, we can move to the other one, because also with some of these participants, a good chunk, like 10 people came back also with additional feedback, and we had conversations with them. All these people that participated were users of the Canvas, had used it at least once, but usually more than once. In the past previous 12 months. So they did confirm that it was a useful tool for self-reflection during the entire process. So from the inception of the project, where you can also start to categorize the same way we do in the archive, categorize existing projects to gather ideas. But then overall, the entire project to support the decisional process. And if you are working in a larger team, or if you have a specific client, you can also use it to establish a common language, which is also critical in a field like that. That is, let's say, it involves often people with different backgrounds. But then areas to improve, I think they are very relevant for us, because the format, it's a PDF, is not accessible. It's very the accessibility features are very limited. We used it in the Audible universe on a PowerPoint. In fact, there was more accessible. We are thinking of implementing a new version online, but that wouldn't make this specific aspect easier. So any advice on this will be very welcome, because other critical annotations were that of course, the description of some blocks are too technical, so we are revisiting that. And the language, you can't embed multimedia content on a PDF, on a printed piece of paper. That's why we thought of platforms like Canvas or Miro, but those are even worse than PDF for accessibility, as far as I know. And then, of course, there is the rectangular shape, there is this order, but this reflects our order. So we should provide a format where people can move around the blocks and deconstruct them as they wish. So we are working on that. Any help, more than welcome. And I think the last slide is about future steps, but is what I already said. So thank you. There's another slide with a reference. If you want to go, this is, I say, the official publication where you find everything that I said here. And my apologies again for these hiccups. Thank you, Mathieu, for jumping in the room. Yeah, and that's it. Here I am.
Well, thank you very much. And if you just want to unmute and ask questions, folks, we'll take a few minutes to do that. I'm glad we had a little spare time to work with today.
There was a lot of information.
Can I ask you? Sorry.
Sorry, just a quick comment, and I put it in the chat too. This is Olivia. That I actually really like that you have some of those more technical aspects, like the philosophical kind of bent to it on the semiotics. Even if somebody, like on their first go around didn't feel kind of equipped to fill those in, I think it's really good to have it there and to get people thinking about it. And it's something that can be taught. Yes, maybe some people would need it to be taught. That's fine, but it can be taught, and it's a really useful bit of information to have on there. And it's also useful even if somebody didn't fill it in, if like you mentioned, if you're showing this canvas to someone, to a client or user, and the person who filled out the canvas didn't put that information in there, well, that's good to know too. Like if I were on the receiving end, I would want to know, were you thinking about this? Did you make decisions in this regard? Are you unsure of this? So I think it's really valuable, and maybe you just need to someone, maybe not you, but someone would need to come up with kind of a good little teaching resource to help explain some of those more technical, philosophical aspects of the Canvas. But otherwise, I think it's really great. I thought it was a really great presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks for this. It's, very interesting feedback. It's probably more about finding the appropriate language and providing the description or a user manual. I mean, it's true. We learn so many things.
Yeah, well, and I think you can have the technical language too, like to show people that that exists, and then just also have kind of more familiar language that would help a broader audience understand it. So both and rather than either or, I think.
And I thought a valuable way to teach that or learn that was to be doing, going through an example in a group where you didn't have that expertise, but somebody else did. And that back and forth conversation was an enjoyable way to acquire that skill, but also knowing that when you're doing that analysis in a group, you didn't have to be an expert on every bit of it before you could move forward. So again, that idea that you've got a multidisciplinary group and you have them for a reason, because learning everything is hard. Adrian, did you have something you wanted to add? Oh, you look like you were ready.
I think Anita maybe had a question or comment too. Mine was just very quick. I'm wondering about where do the aesthetics aspects fit in? Is that in the and emotionality, or if that's even a word, but where do aesthetics and emotion fit into the design process?
In my view, everywhere. I mean, it's the idea of reflecting on the process is really goes in that direction. I'll say that, I mean, design itself for me is defined as really a functional endeavor with attention to the aesthetic experience, to the aesthetic quality of what you do, and asking yourself, sometimes positioning these choices as aesthetics or emotion related is still such a taboo in many fields. It's surprising, but it is so. The moment you say the word aesthetic, some of the people that you are talking with, absolutely in good faith, will think that you are thinking of adding sparkles and colors at the end of the process. So the idea of pushing someone to reflect on what sounds am I choosing? I think that then the aesthetic judgment will come in anyways, necessarily, because most of the sounds that are ugly to hear is because they weren't chosen at all. That's in my experience. Then Anita said earlier, scientists will not need pleasant sounds. I agree. It's just that they're pleasant in that context. They are useful, they are functional, they have an aesthetic, but aesthetic doesn't necessarily mean beauty. It means that the sensory experience attached to those sounds is appropriate for the project. And most likely is also sustainable over the time that a scientist will need to listen to. Otherwise, they will change it. Otherwise, they will not use it. So if it is appropriate to the context, if it is appropriate to your user, if it meets the expectations of your listener, and if you chose it for a reason, I think this stands for attention to the aesthetic experience. Rather than asking, rather than thinking this sound because it's nicer, which is also, it might be appropriate, is really context dependent. So
okay, sure, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can, I only had a quick question. Thanks, Sarah. Presentation was beautiful. I might have missed it. What kind of users evaluated your canvas? Sorry if you mentioned it.
Yeah, I didn't quote it in this. It was not in this presentation. It's in the article. So I sent it out to 50 people that we knew used the canvas before. There was a good part of astronomers from the audible universe. Maybe some of you also participated. There were information designers that used it before, either in a commercial context, in the industry, like people I knew that worked with cars, auditory display for cars, researchers that used it as an analysis tool, so mostly to map a specific field of sonification. People that work, researchers also that work in the field of sonification and visualization. So maybe Bruce left, but we are also involved in this informal group of two worlds, visualization and sonification, and we are trying to compare strategies and come to a mutual understanding. And see, so people that worked in this field and that I knew used the canvas for analysis rather than to create new sonifications. And then some journalists that also work with sound. I have the breakdown exactly of how many. Researchers were the majority though, but researchers not directly in the field of sound. Yeah.
And do you think the feedback was fairly homogeneous, or different backgrounds were leading to different kind of feedback?
No, it was very homogeneous.
Okay.
Yeah, very homogeneous. There's another specific, there's another diagram that breaks down answers, especially because attractive work with pairs of semantic oppositions to rate each quality. So it would say good, bad, ugly, beautiful, and so on. So there were some extreme answers, more in the sense, some word pairs would be not so appropriate for the canvas, like innovative or brave and bold or conservative. And there is where you can see big differences. I don't know to what extent those are applicable, in fact, to the canvas. It wasn't designed with the idea of being, disruptive for the field. But we decided to use this questionnaire because it's already validated, is used, and it is in that sense. However, for the new version, we interpreted this being, say, innovative or bold, I think was the term. As in, for instance, if we provide a way that it can be very customizable in the experience, that there will be, it is conservative in the sense that it replicates the format of canvases that is already used often, perhaps too much. I know plenty of people that, tell me, I hate canvases. They are everywhere. They became meaningless. So that could be reflected, but I wouldn't say there was a relationship with the background of participants.
Yeah, which is very encouraging, right? It means it can be used across disciplines and backgrounds. Thank you.
Well, we are going to wrap this up, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And if you care to join us again this afternoon, I will get to my editing job, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Kate,
everyone.
do you think you can make something with my presentation?
Yeah, I just need a cup of coffee and a little bit of time.
Okay, thank you.
We'll manage. We'll have Bruce also, and I've heard it now, so we'll do okay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.